So I'm very grateful to bring Al Puchala up to talk with us about really the opportunities for partnership with private capital and some of the vision that he has. And Al runs CapZone, which is the largest opportunity zone investor in the country. So he's got a few ideas about how we can get this done too.
Before we get into the slideshow, it's a very tough act to follow Curtis. It's so inspiring. So I'll try to be a step up to the moment. But before we do that, I want to share with you that I told Michelle, who's a unique individual, she can bring all of us together, set the stage, set the tone, set the culture, a very special person. But I said, Michelle, this is the second most important speech I'm giving this month. And I have to explain to her why. So I'll start this speech with how I started the other speech earlier this month. Hi, I'm Al Puchala, and I'm the father of the bride. And boy, that was the hardest speech I gave, because my daughter told me, she's 31, and she said, Dad, don't screw up. You get one shot, no mulligans. So make sure, and I think I passed. But so that was earlier this month, but I'm happy to be here. The other rule my daughter gave me is don't talk about opportunity zones at my wedding, because you always talk about zones at all the cocktails and no one talks to you after a while. So you will really bore everyone and anyone. So I'm so happy to have this audience who is going to be hard to leave. And if you leave, I'll see that you're going to leave as we talk about opportunity zones. And again, before we hop into opportunity zones, and zones are just a tool. I want to talk about it as a tool to help people and help our country and our communities. I've dedicated my life to public-private partnerships. In some ways, when I grew up in Chicago as an urban kid, although I love rural America, I was in the first class of Head Start as a kindergartner. My parents were academics, didn't have a lot of money, and they said, President Johnson has this new program, this summer pilot, and you're gonna go. And I walked by myself as a 5-year-old, inner city Chicago, to Head Start that summer. And I remember Barbara Janish, my teacher, and it was great. And it really affected me that you can have people who care about you, teach you, invest in human capital. And the government can do good things with good policy. So over my career, I've been a student of public-private partnerships. After college, I went to Wall Street. My day job was mergers, acquisitions, recapitalizations, IPOs, all types of financing. But my real passion was P3s, public-private partnerships. I got to go to Russia with my boss, Michael Blumenthal, who was the former Secretary of the Treasury, and carried his bag as we tried to set up the US-Russia Fund to teach the Russians capitalism. Didn't work out well. After Solyndra, was asked by the Department of Energy to help put together the Loan Program Office oversight process on how the government should manage its loan book, the $30 billion renewable portfolio. Very proud that became a model for the rest of the government. Excuse me. And then USDA and Secretary Vilsack asked me to set up the Rural Opportunity Infrastructure Fund. It was a $10 billion fund under the Obama administration. CoBank was one of the investors and others. And we got to work and put a lot of money in rural America. So that's really where I learned that rural America is a very special place. It punches way above its weight in terms of protecting our country and feeding our country. So I'm really happy that this organization has asked me to come here. What I'd like to do is level set what opportunity zones are. It's misunderstood. It can actually be misused, not by me, but it's a tool, just like anything is a tool to either do good or harm. So let's go to the videotape. So what are opportunity zones? This is a program that is existentially different than anything in American history, because it's a location-based subsidy without approvals, licenses, certificates, or anything. Think of it almost like a muni bond, but for equity. Now, how did it come to be? Well, in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017, a little 15-page law, which was a draft by Jared Bernstein, who works now for the president as his chief economist, and Kevin Hassett, who actually is a conservative economist who is President Trump's chief economist. They created a thought experiment, 15-page, if you were God, how would you bring capital to low-income communities? Basically, that got slipped into the law without anyone reading it. Remember the 1,000 pages in the tax cut job. So what the law said is, If you trigger a gain, could be your stock, your bond, your company, your stamp collection, that gain you can either pay tax on, capital gains, or you can invest it in an opportunity zone. That's basically what the law said. So for 2 years, the IRS through 2018 and 19 guided America to pick the zones and set up the process for how that happens. And we'll talk a little bit about that today in a few minutes. But this is now set for the next, I think, until 2047. For the next 24 years, these are polygons. They're census tracts. They're not zip codes. They're not counties. They're not MSAs, RSAs. They're census tracts. Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, census tracts. And what they do is allow any taxpayer, individual, corporate, institutional investor who has a capital gain, short-term or long-term, to invest in that community in any type of investment. Real estate, operating companies, infrastructure, solar, data centers, whatever you want, and it's on you, just like your personal taxes. If you file them and you're right, you're fine. If they're wrong and you get audited, you'll pay tax and a penalty. So there's no approvals, disclosure, unlimited, and it's just different because most of subsidies in America happen 2 different ways. Number one, demographics. Are you poor? Are you a student? Are you a vet? Are you a farmer? And then we have a tax, regime that helps, guide resources their way. Or by sector, right? The ITC solar, light tech housing, but geography, location, other than maybe a few smaller exceptions, state block grants or TIFs in downtowns, we don't use location as a way to subsidize, and especially not one without any kind of going to the government to get a approval. This can happen, anyone can do it. So it's a different way. It's put the system kind of on its heels. It was, I think, mislaunched. It was not used appropriately in my view. Initially, it kind of gentrified some folks. It was going to do deals that would have happened anyway. There's a chance now for this program to be really 2.0, to do what it was really meant to do, help these communities. And my father was a professor of sociology, but he was also a worker for the city of Chicago and working in the South Side with gang leaders to help them get jobs and summer camps and all this. And he said, if you do one thing for someone, but you don't do the other things they need, it often devolves. So the community needs a basket of things. And that's why zones, they can do the real estate, can do the infrastructure, can do the operating companies, early stage or late stage, they all get the tax break. That's why it's different and something that can really, I think, help America. What's the tie to rural America? Well, the good news is there's a pending law, now that we have a Speaker of the House, I think, just picked. Hopefully some legislation will start to move. There's bipartisan legislation sitting that already went through Ways and Means. If it gets passed by the House, it'll get passed by the Senate. And it does a few things. Number one, on the old zones that were picked, that really cover about 35 million people in opportunity zones, 10% of America, 1,400 universities, 200 military bases. These are all, every state has them. There's a new definition that got added, which is for rural persistent poverty. And this just is in the last few months. This is all different from the law that was passed 5 years ago. And what this says, and these are the dark blues, those areas now will, if the law as on a bipartisan basis, and Senators Booker and Tim Scott both support it, the House supports it through Ways and Means, these new zones will be in rural America and only for areas that have persistent poverty, covering a lot of the locales that are represented in this room. So kind of very exciting for rural America. Number two, it extends the law to keep investing in these zones. And by the way, I'm happy to have this distributed afterwards to anyone who'd like it on the deck, so you don't feel like you have to keep notes. It gets pretty heavy. But what it really does is bring the program to rural America. It extends the law, it supports it. There are lots of other good things that happen. So this room could really be the organ to to move the program ahead, not just to be successful, but to really connect it to rural America uniquely. So that's why I'm very excited about this discussion, because I really think this is the type of impact the law was meant to have for these places that are clearly in need of capital, that catalytic event. So what is an Opportunity Zone Fund? There are two acronyms, if you become a zone head like I am, that you have to learn. One is a QOF, Qualified Opportunity Fund. There are two acronyms the IRS discusses in its 544 pages of final regulations that we've actually codified in our software. But a QOF is a newly formed entity of any type. It could be a C Corp, S Corp, LLC, LP, even a REIT. And you can set up yourself the way you want it. For $25, set up an LLC, you are a QOF unless you're overturned on audit. So it's almost like a 401k. You just do it, and I think every American in a few years will have one. I think there'll be millions of QOFs. Today, there's already $200 billion today in QOFs, in 20,000 QOFs. Remember, you don't need approval, you don't have to disclose it, so people are setting them up. Supposedly there's an SEC filing. Elon Musk set up his own QOF. He sold Tesla shares, put it in his QOF, and he's doing his SpaceX investments that way. So he said, this is happening. This is as we speak. If this law gets passed as it should in the next few weeks, it's becoming a $1 trillion equity asset class. This is how big and organic this is. So a QOF has basically, the best thing I always do is give a little example. So Michelle's an investor. She bought a stamp for $1 in the past, and she sold a stamp for $101. She has a $100 gain, right? If nothing happened, she'd pay tax at whatever rate, 20% plus a surcharge, a state tax. But she says, no, she wants to get it to Autumn, who has a great business, right? And I want to invest it in that opportunity zone where Autumn is in West Virginia. So what has to happen, this is all just tax geek stuff, you have to set up a QOF. If you don't have a QOF, you can't get the tax break. So Michelle says, hey, Al, could you help me set up a QOF? I say, sure. CapZone will set up a QOF for her. It'll be her QOF, she can own it, doesn't need any approvals, no disclosure, and she puts her $100 in that LLC. Now, two good things happen to Michelle just by doing that. It hasn't yet hit the balance sheet of Autumn. Number one, she doesn't pay the IRS this year. She says, yep, 2023, $100 gain, no IRS, I'm not paying you the 20 bucks. And they're fine because they saw the wire that went to her own QOF. That's how easy it is, that easy. Any American, any corporation, any institution can set up a QOF today and do that. Now, a second good thing happens. If Michelle holds that interest in the LLC for 5 years, she takes 10% off her tax payment. So apples to apples, 20 bucks today, or when she does pay it, and she will pay that old tax on that old selling the stamp, she's only going to pay $18, 10% off. So to get her off the bench, we're going to get Michelle to say, yep, I want to help that community. I want to have a fair return. Government, give me a few bucks in subsidy. And she now has two good things happen. Time value of money, not paying her tax, 10% off. Okay, now the CapZone QOF that I set up for Michelle has 100 bucks. I have to quickly put it into a zone business. That's where Autumn comes through. So I'm looking around saying, who has a business that's in a zone or a real estate project or a company? Oh, Autumn, you have this great clean energy business. Do you want my $100 to invest in your normal Series A? You're taking money from all your other investors. You're taking grants. You're taking loans. She's not prohibited from doing anything, but she's got to be in the zone. And we'll talk about what that means in a minute. I invest 100 bucks in Autumn's business. Remember the 100 bucks that Michelle gave me? I only have 6 months to do it. So remember how fast this is, right? 180 days, Michelle had to invest very quickly after her gain, and I only have 6 months as the fund manager to give it now to Autumn. Autumn, in 10 years or longer, up until the year 2047, so 23 years, if she does her normal business, and then in 10 years from now, she sells out for 4 times the money, she gives me back $400, I don't pay tax on $300, no tax due. And in 32 states, no state tax due on that capital gain. She hits Google level, 1,000 times your money, no tax due. See, so it's very powerful. No one's telling you how to invest the money. No one's telling you there are all these filings, other than there's a 2-page filing on your tax, in your annual tax code filing that says, yep, I'm still invested in Autumn's company, and I'm done. So that's why it's meant to take all the bureaucracy out of getting that tax break. There are no forms, you self-certify, but if you're wrong, you're gonna pay taxes and you're gonna pay a penalty, right? So that's why you'll see what we did, but we at CapZone tried to create basically the turbo tax of zones so that everyone can comply. That's one of the things we thought was important 5 years ago. This is the business rules that Autumn has to follow, and they are pretty complex. But if she's really in the zone, the bottom line is 2 rules that matter. There are a few, 100 rules probably, but 2 rules that matter. Is she hiring people in the zone? It's a Jobs Act. The IRS, after 2 years of looking at this little 15-page law, created 544 pages of tax regs. Today it's final law. You just go on their website, look up IRS opportunity zones. There are 90 frequently asked questions for how not to pay your tax. People always ask you, why is the IRS helping you not pay tax? Well, because they're creating new taxpayers with this money. It really is good government. That's why I think it's one of the best laws, if properly used, that's really going to help rebuild America equitably and sustainably. So if she pays half her payroll to people in the zone, she's good. Either by hours, by aggregate dollars, or they call it the landscape business example, which is even though people are cutting rich people's lawns, they move the equipment back every night to a zone, and that counts also. So there are lots of ways to prove it's a Jobs Act, but in the end it's about payroll, which is the safe harbor. So it's a great way to say we want jobs in those communities. It's whether it's K-1, W-2, 1099, you gotta create jobs. That's why it's a really perfect way to prove you're really helping that community. And the other one is that you have to have your 70% of your tangible assets in the zone. You can't move your assets outside. So you have to, buy land or have a factory or something. And a lease counts as a good compliant asset. So if you just, my little company, CapZone, we're in a zone, we do everything in zones. I have a lease for a couple $1,000s a month. That's my asset in the zone. I've proved I'm in the zone for the balance sheet test. Remember 2 tests, income statement, balance sheet. Income statement is, do you pay people? Balance sheet, do you have a lease or own land? And everything else is pretty easy to follow. But if you have those 2 things, she is good property for that tax break. So that's all we do. So this whole scheme of, Michelle with the gain, the fund manager investing, Autumn having the business, that's what we try to create, that flow of money. And that's why $200 billion today, in 5 years, today, is already at work in these zones. We don't have to belabor this, but the deferral of money, you get to not pay your tax on your old gain. You take 10% off. You actually get 15% off if you held for 7 years. And then going forward, your new gain permanently excluded, which is, great, right? You don't have to pay. If you really help that community, you're basically picking up 500 basis points, 5% IRR on your equity return, which is massive for a long-term return. What are the other benefits? Well, it's a equity program. Michelle could have done everything correctly. She triggers a gain, she puts it into the fund. Let's say I don't, and I want to invest in Autumn's business. When we get 4 times our money, Michelle pays nothing, right? She did all the steps correctly. I didn't trigger a gain, or I didn't do the rules. At the fund level above Autumn, I pay tax. I wouldn't even know it. See, there's no program here. It's just a flow of money that helps get that money to the zones. And then you can actually get debt on way better basis. This Biden administration, if you're in a zone, has lots of extra goodies throughout the entire federal government. It's an all-of-government situation. EDA has programs for zones. EPA has programs for zones. Commerce Department. Basically, it's a magnet for grants and loans. HUD prioritizes, if you're in a zone, to get money and grants. So, and the banks get CRA credit. So there's a huge magnetic effect to be a zone company like Autumn to bring all this money together. And then there are other projects. Once you create the thing, Like, for instance, we're working a lot with HBCUs in the country. I was at Jackson State, working with others. If they build the student housing or the research center, well, you'll need other stuff around it, like small businesses or contractors. They all can get the tax break. So having that catalytic event in a zone can often be the way to get that community, get that community a chance. We pride ourselves on listening to the community. We always go meet with the local stakeholders, what should get built, what were the issues with something. So it's actually good business. It's not only the right thing to do, of course, but over the long run, do I really want a project over 10 or plus years that the community doesn't want, right? It's not good business. So if done correctly, it really aligns the interests. And in our case, we have a compliance solution, which is, we call it CapZone Analytics. It does all these rules and measurements and stuff based on our tax software. We've done a few projects. We've put a little bit over $100 million to date in our projects. We have a few $100 million pending. We did a VA clinic. During the pandemic, the Veterans Affairs Department came to us and said, look, vets in Minnesota, they don't have health care in Albert Lea, Minnesota, because we, by chance, raised our clinic. We needed it up fast. I said, well, give me a lease. Give me a 20-year lease. I'll build it for you, and it'll be up in 6 months. And it was. And vets were getting health care during the pandemic in Albert Lea because of zone capital. It came in quickly. We've done some workforce housing. One's already fully stabilized in New London, Connecticut, and we're working now with the Navy and some of the other DoD services. Military communities need a lot of things built, right? They need housing, they need services for their returning warriors and others. So we pride ourselves in working with the military and federal government authorities, and we're doing something in Colorado Springs right now with a camp, especially that's ADA compliant for disabled veterans who can live there and also start businesses there. And then lastly, this is our CapZone Analytics. It itself is in Deep Ellum, Dallas, in a zone. So it serves our portfolio to do all the rules to make sure we're compliant. It's a service offering for everyone else. So we think this asset class needed a solution. We have components. Other people are doing a good job too, of course. So I think tying this to rural America and people in this room, we're really happy to have this opportunity. And the team is small. There are another probably dozen folks who we've added since we had that slide, but we're really happy to be resources for everyone here trying to really help these communities, and shame on us if we don't really get some of these communities who never get capital, access to it. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it, and you have to listen to me as the wedding folks didn't, so I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Al. And I hope very much in the spirit of the way in which we've all been connecting and sharing ideas and connecting dots and aligning, right, with all the different gifts and all the different, the spirit, that we bring to the work, that y'all will track Al down. And I've already had a couple of people come over and tap me and say, I want to connect with him. I want a copy of his presentation, because it takes everybody. It takes all of us working together. It takes all the money. It takes all the money and more, right? Even and more. And as we go into the rest of this afternoon, as we move into tomorrow morning, where we'll hear about more super wonky tax credit stuff, including about direct pay. And then as we transition into the half day that we'll spend together tomorrow, and where we really dig in, we have 2 sets of workshops, right? That we'll be doing together, including one led by Milken, where you can profile your projects and get a rank order list of all the federal dollars and how well they match, like 97%. 53%. We want to just continue weaving these pieces together. So track down Al. I'm going to continue tracking down Al about this rural idea. And there is just so much good we can do. And we are at a moment where we're just blessed with this abundance of having the actual money that we need. We just got to do right. We got to do it right.